Hello people, I'm back once again with another episode of ELAVI Truth TV. This time it's going to be in response to the development of Boris Johnson's rule of 666 and the restrictions that are now being placed on society. Restrictions is the right word. Now obviously a lot of people may have thought from my last episode to do with Boris and his rule of 666 that I was getting a little bit biblical on you or using terms that denote some form of evil. But I'm not the only person who was referred to this new rule as 666. I'm going to go to this television doctor, this fake television doctor that has been hoisted on the masses for a long time now. And he has kind of coined a phrase also, 666. But what he's talking about is trying to make people comply. And why the restriction of just having six people was put in place. Let's listen to Dr. Hilary Jones.
The rule of 6 is good because we need clarity and we need simplicity.
Yep.
People need to understand why we need to restrict numbers. Now, if we can explain that and people understand why we need to restrict the numbers who are gathering together, then we're more likely to get a compliant population. So I think it's good, and I think it's actually quite good not to have different ages considered differently. 666. It's dead simple.
Compliance is something that I've been facing a lot lately. People have wanted me to comply. When I was locked up, they were making me comply using force. And Dr. Hilary Jones, to use the term doctor loosely, is trying to make us believe that he's explaining something to us in order to make us willingly comply. However, if we go to this news story, we can see that that isn't necessarily true.
Well, let's have the latest on coronavirus now. And new laws banning people from meeting in groups of more than 6 have come into force in England, Scotland and Wales. In England, the Home Office Minister, Kit Malthouse, urged people to report their neighbours to police if they're seen to be breaking the new laws.
That's right. Like Nazi Germany, the Gestapo and the Stasi, we are being encouraged to snitch on our neighbours. We are being told that we must be in bubbles of 6 people and that anybody who doesn't comply with this is supposed to be turned over to the police. Now, if anybody went to the protest in London at the last weekend, what transpired from there was the way that the police have been dealing with citizens or people of the UK. I've got stories of how the police have dealt with me lately, but it's not about a personal thing, it's about what's happening on a mass scale. Obviously we're all individuals, but are we being treated as such? Now, I want to go into a little bit of what Boris said last night, so let's go in.
The vast majority have complied with the rules. There have been too many breaches, too many opportunities for our invisible enemy to slip through undetected.
The thing that sticks out to me is this use of the term invisible enemy. And I'll come back to that, but I just want to show you somebody else who seems to be reading from the same playbook.
I want to say that I know that this is a challenging time for all Americans. We're enduring a great national trial, and we will prove that we can meet the moment. I want to assure the American people that we're doing everything we can each day to confront and ultimately defeat this horrible, invisible enemy. We're at war. In a true sense, we're at war, and we're fighting an invisible enemy.
That's right. His American counterpart, Donald Trump, is also referring us to the coronavirus as the invisible enemy. Which is interesting because on one level, coronavirus is invisible. But I know that everybody has been programmed, subtly programmed, to believe that they know exactly what coronavirus looks like with images like this, which have been all around since this all started. And what I'm trying to talk about is the way that they have used the kind of psychological method of us having us know what this virus looks like, what it can do and can't do. And it has been a kind of psychological warfare on us. So on one level we have this virus that many of us have never come into contact with. I, for one, have never seen anybody with the virus. I don't believe that I have the virus, and apart from what the media tells me, I've seen no evidence in the real world. But don't attack me, I'm just saying what I have experienced. So We have what the media is telling us, and then we have what we experience in our everyday lives. And I think that when we use symbols and images and numbers, as the elite do, it's a very powerful way of controlling our minds. So let's go a bit further into what Boris is saying.
And as for that minority who may continue to flout the rules, we will enforce those rules with tougher penalties and fines of up to £10,000. We will put more police out on the streets and use the army to backfill if necessary.
So in a time where people are suffering financially, businesses are falling, people are unable to make the livings that they used to make, everybody's worrying, many people are unable to feed themselves. So in a time like this, the Prime Minister is thinking about fining people up to £10,000 for going against these rules that many of the people cannot understand why these restrictions are being brought into place. A restriction such as pubs closing at 10 o'clock, hospitality places closing at 10 o'clock, because apparently the virus is more prevalent and more aggressive after 10 o'clock. I don't know if this is the case, but one must ponder as to why the 10 o'clock seems to be a cut-off. Now, he also mentioned that there will be more police and the army. So is this the soft rollout of the police state? Is it? Martial law that is already happening across the world in places like Australia. Is this the soft rollout? You need to answer this. But I want to go a bit further into what Mr. Johnson is saying, the PM.
Is that your mild cough can be someone else's death knell.
Your mild cough can be somebody else's death knell. So again, the psychological implication of what this man is telling you is that you are a weapon that can kill your neighbour. Furthermore, your neighbour is a weapon that can kill you, just with their mild cough. I'm so afraid that I don't even want to cough now, because I don't want my cough to travel through my camera and infect people on YouTube or some of the other platforms that I'm now coming up on. I don't want to do it. It sounds crazy what I've just said, but I know that there's people isolated now who are in fear. And has that fear been reduced, or has it escalated? Now, I very seldom hear politicians talk about love. And many times they might, if they do, be talking about it in terms of winning votes or kissing babies, you know, to make themselves appear more human. But remember, we're dealing with psychopaths here. And today, this psychopath has told us that a national lockdown. Well, let's go and listen to what he has to say.
And if we were forced into a new national lockdown, that would threaten not just jobs and livelihoods, but the loving human contact on which we all depend. It would mean renewed loneliness and confinement for the elderly and vulnerable, and ultimately it would threaten once again the education of our children.
So after threatening us, he tells us that a new national lockdown could threaten the love in nature that we all have. It could threaten our children being educated, and it could lead to old people being left alone again and lead to depression. But I've got news for this Prime Minister, because those things are already happening daily. We are already becoming divided. We are already walking in fear. The old people are already falling into depression. The suicides are already up. Domestic violence is already on the rise. People are already taking their lives. So when I talk about the beast system and 666, I'm not wanting people to go to their Bible. If you're biblical and you're religious and you want to believe that, it's good. But at the same time, I'm talking about the energy that is being rolled out onto the planet, into the system. The energy of fear, the energy of hatred, and the energy of division. And what I'm trying to encourage people to do is this. Close your eyes to the disease that they're trying to inflict in our mind, and try and hold on to this thing that some people think is a cliche called love. Now, the reason I want to speak about this is because many people know my situation. They know that I've been ripped out of the lives of my children, and I'll go more into detail in this in one of the episodes that I do on my arrest and detention. But what I've learned in past weeks, especially how I've been arrested again for saying the names of my children, is that the mother of my children has actually, for a few years now, wanted me to act in a negative and aggressive way and act outside of the parameters of love. And if I'd ever done that, then one, I wouldn't be sitting here, and two, I would have played into her game. The reason why I tell you this is because we are not only in the grips of some kind of pandemic. More rightly, we are in the grips of the elites using silent weapons for an invisible war. Now, a gun, a bomb are the kind of weapons we know about. However, these silent psychological weapons, which are aimed at breaking down our resolve, breaking down our spirit, is something that we cannot see. When Boris Johnson and Donald Trump are talking about an invisible enemy, they are talking about COVID-19. But I'm going to use their same term to talk about a more destructive enemy. The invisible enemy that I'm talking about is called hatred, division, and mind control. Because what's subtly happening, and will happen more and more intensely as these restrictions rolled out, is that what defines us as being human is being stripped away from us. As I said, my power came from using the truth, telling the truth, but never becoming violent, never becoming angry, never becoming aggressive, so that people could say, there's the bad guy. But you see, what they want us to do is they want us to become frustrated, because these Agenda 21 restrictions that are coming into play are not here to make our lives easier. They're here to level us. Because in terms of Agenda 21, which I'll go into at a later date, we are looked at as objects that need to be logged, categorized, and controlled. We need to comply. And the problem is this: some people are very compliant, and they might be happy to live under these restrictions. But some people like myself have a kind of burning desire to just be a human being and to be free. Free from tyranny. So I'm asking people to do what people like me do best, which is rebel. Not in any violent sense, but rebel to retain your humanity. Rebel in order to preserve your loving nature. Because when Boris Johnson speaks about love, don't forget, he has already threatened you prior to that. So he isn't really speaking about love that we understand, the nurturing love of our children. Now, much of what I do on this channel is highlighting negative stuff, but I'm not trying to be a negative truth sayer. I'm trying to say, if we solve the problems of society, we can reach what is happening, an awakening of love, fellowship, and understanding. Not brought to us under some new world order, but brought to us from our own innate desire to have a unity between all living people on this planet. So I'm going to sign out now, and I'm going to say to people as I sign out, do not be mind controlled, and listen, do not be fooled, because the biggest weapon that they use against us is deception. Open your eyes, people.